Okay, guys, we're going to be doing just an overview of the Cold War. I don't have a lot of time because I have a lot of things to do, prepare for the wedding, and a lot of this stuff is kind of review. You're actually reading this in your textbook, and so I'm just trying to give you the understanding of how everything connects together. What is the bigger picture? What are the main themes? What do you need to concentrate on? So I'm going to be, flying through a lot of these things because you can get the actual details of how those things actually happened throughout the Cold War. The reason why we're going over this still is that so you understand how kind of AP Euro is going to be ending, as a course in curriculum. What else do I need to cover? It's been a while since the last lecture. Last lecture is Age of Anxiety, so totalitarianism and World War II has all happened. All these dictators have happened, and they've changed Europe. So don't go based upon the last lecture, but go based upon your studies of World War II. Okay, so at the end of World War II, we're going to see that Europe is going to really fall apart in the sense of more of the imperialist type of system is going to lose power in the sense where the colonies will gain independence from their European nations that once have owned them. The world is going to be split in between haves and have-nots, and there's going to be the first world, second world, and third world develop. And the Cold War is essentially this. It's that there's two superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union, coming out of World War II as victorious. These are the two countries that have come out as the stronger nations. And the first world countries are going to be friends of the United States. The second world countries are going to be friends of the Soviet Union. And the third world countries, right, the most poorest of the poor developing nations, they are going to support both superpowers. And this is really where the struggle and competition for political influence, for power, and to show strength of ideological dominance between communism and democracy is really going to thrive. It's in the third world where the competition is really happening. And so this is going to be a struggle for power, and that's why it's called the Cold War. It's because there's never a direct war between the two, actual fighting on both soils. Okay. All right. So some background. We need to go back into World War II and talk about these conferences. So the Tehran Conference takes place in Iran. It talks about how the Soviet Union wanted to make sure that Eastern Europe, okay, this whole green territory that you see in the map, is going to be liberated by them. This is in the middle of World War II, and the Nazis will not, be able to take over Eastern Europe, and the Soviet Union is going to help them gain independence. At that time, that's where they were practicing a policy of the United States was pushing for a policy of self-determination. Once Eastern Europe is freed, can they choose their own government? Soviet Union obviously does not want that. Then we have the Yalta Conference. Yalta Conference is talking about how the United States now wants to have democratic elections in Eastern Europe. Stalin says okay, but he'll take back his word. And this is where they decide to divide up Germany into 4 zones. So I'm going to fly through this because you can get these details kind of in your crash course and all that kind of stuff. So we'll talk about why they split it up into 4 zones and why did they not agree upon having one unified Germany, because remember, Germany had to unify. Now it's disunified. Last conference is Potsdam Conference. This is taking place in Germany after World War II ends in Europe, where Germany has surrendered. President Harry Truman at that time, is going to demand free elections, so democracy in Eastern Europe. How does Stalin think? No, we want communism, and Stalin's going to create a buffer zone, right? So this buffer zone is basically a protection barrier between Germany and the Soviet Union in case a future war does happen, because Germany has always been really militarily powerful, right? Okay, so the differing in worldviews, right? So you have democracy from the West, and you have, United States, Great Britain. They hold to this. And how does the Soviet Union think of democracy? They think it's very hostile to communism. Multi-party is showing disunity, right? Disunity amongst the social classes. And so because for many reasons of why the Soviet Union saw the U.S. not really helping World War II until later, right? They felt like they have broken off their good relationship. Stalin also was seen to be always trying to influence Eastern Europe, and the United States on that side didn't feel comfortable with that. They want democracy and free elections there. If they want to be communist, let them choose to be. Don't force them to be. Okay, and so this is where Churchill's Iron Curtain speech comes in. I'll read a quick quote from it. From the Stettin in the Baltic to Trieste in the Adriatic, an Iron Curtain has descended across the continent. Behind that line, all the capitals of the ancient states of Central and Eastern Europe. So see that red line? He names all those things, and he talks about how the populations around them lie in the Soviet sphere, and all are subject in one form or another. Okay, not only to Soviet influence, but to a very high and increasing measure of control from Moscow. And so this is kind of Stalin's goal, and Churchill's bringing it to light of what he's trying to do, right? What is Stalin trying to do by alerting Americans and saying, you know what, you better watch out, right? Because the Iron Curtain is a metaphor, right? It's not a real steel curtain, but it's there. It's protecting what's happening behind the Soviet sphere of influence. Okay, so we talked about how Germany is going to be divided into 4 zones, right? And so they're going to divide up Germany, East Germany and West Germany. The Allies, democratic powers, Great Britain, France, United States is going to be West Germany, 3 zones there, and then you have East Germany, which is controlled by the Soviet Union. Why did they split up? Well, the reason why is because they thought that if Germany was split, they would not be able to be a threat to them. Also, by splitting them up, right, they have control over it, and this is where the Soviet Union wanted Germany to pay heavy reparations back to them in the form of agricultural and industrial goods. And so they really want to, the Soviet Union really wants to keep Germany poor and struggling because it doesn't want to make it strong and powerful again. The US and Western European countries realized we cannot withhold them back. Germany was a thriving economic country, industrial, productive country because of under Hitler, because he brought it back, but they realized that they should be working with West Germany. Okay, so this is where the 2 Germanys are established. You have East Germany and West Germany, the Democratic Republic of Germany by Walter Lübcke, and West Germany, the Federal Republic of Germany. And so on one side of Germany, you're going to have capitalism, democracy, and on the other side is going to be communism. East and West, it's pretty much the same thing. West is always going to be democratic, capitalist, all that kind of stuff. Okay, all right, moving on. So some major policies we need to understand. These are key terms: containment, Truman Doctrine, and Marshall Plan. Containment is where the U.S.'s policy is trying to prevent communism from spreading. Please contain, right, the wildfire that is going to be spreading like poison, contaminating the world, right? So the Truman Doctrine is saying that we want to apply communism in a practical sense, which is going to give financial aid, resources to countries that are threatened by communism, such as Greece and Turkey. Okay, Truman Doctrine, containment, Marshall Plan, really important. You cannot forget these things. Okay, so the U.S. makes a pledge that it will provide support financially if there is a threat to these countries. Okay, Marshall Plan essentially is where the U.S. is offering $13 billion in financial support to help Europe recover and rebuild itself. Really, its true intention, the United States was trying to prevent communism from reaching these economically devastated regions, because whenever a country is struggling economically, right, many times people feel like we have nothing, right? Why are there people that have things still? It's not fair. We want communism. We want things equal, right? And we want to have an equal distribution of wealth, and that's what people, demand for communism. But if they have enough money and things are not, bad and struggling, it'll be okay. And so this is where we're going to go into the next lecture. After this is going to be calling the economic miracle. Just FYI, okay, I'm blasting through it as fast as possible, and I'm essentially covering the entire Cold War in hopefully under 30 minutes, and we can go. I usually do this in a month for world history, but we're just going over the main points. Okay, so the Soviet Union obviously is not going to approve of the Marshall Plan, any of that money to go into Eastern Europe, because at that point, then they're going to be easily influenced by the Western powers. Okay, so one thing to know: Truman Doctrine obviously comes from Harry Truman, President Truman, who wanted to support this policy for containment. Okay, all right. So how are the events unfolding? Essentially, we understand a few things which I forgot to mention in the beginning. Okay, we understand the causes of the Cold War. Okay, some of the major events that lead to tensions rising that almost brings out in World War III but never happens. Okay, and also what happens to the fall of the Soviet Union. Okay, so it's kind of a three-step process. So some of the major events we just got to throw out there and understand is Berlin is the capital of Germany. Okay, and the city of Berlin is located in East Germany. East Germany is controlled by the Soviet Union. So they also have to split Berlin up into 4 sectors as well. And so the thing is, you have West Berlin, capitalist, democratic, in a completely surrounded communist state, and it's still split by those Allied powers. And so Stalin believes that West Berlin is kind of like this tumor, this thorn that is just sucking up and treating and giving him headaches and everything. Okay, and because everyone wants to live in West Berlin because it's way nicer because it's not communist. Okay, all right. So what does Stalin do? He sets up a blockade. Blockades it. What do the Allies do? They send an airlift, right? And this is a way to indirectly react to Stalin's ways. Okay, so we're not going to fight them head on. It's very passive aggressive, and you're trying to avoid these types of conflicts. Okay, so Allies are successful in the airlift. That's just one example. Then you have the alliances of NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization, and Warsaw Pact. Major alliances. Basically, you have the West, which is green, and then you have the East, which is red, and these countries are aligned with themselves and saying that we will protect you if anything happens. If the other side is going to attack you, we have your back. Okay, and so this is where we can see collective security happen throughout the Cold War. Did anything happen between these organizations, these treaties? No. Okay, nothing broke out. Then we have the arms race, where the United States was first to drop the atomic bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki on Japan, and then after Russian spies came in, they found the research. By 1949, 4 years later, the Soviet Union got a hold of their atomic bomb, and this is what we call an arms race, right? So arms race is the glorification of building up military arms, nuclear arms, to prove that you are stronger. So this is where they're going to start building all these different types of fission bombs, nuclear fission bombs, and so you have a hydrogen bomb, which is about like 100 times more powerful than an atomic bomb, and this is where the United States comes out at first, and the Soviet Union is neck and neck, where they're finally creating even more powerful missiles and so on and so forth, which is going to bring a huge scare to the world, especially Americans and Soviets. Okay, then you have China becoming communist in 1949. Huge, largest country in the world becomes communist, false communism. This is kind of leading to domino theory. They cannot contain it, right? It's just spreading at this point, which eventually will spread to the Korean War, which will end in 1953. Sorry, it's covered up. Okay, so the Korean War is where the North is supported by China and the Soviet Union. The South is supported by the UN and the United States, and then there's fighting. And eventually nothing has been settled, and that's why North Korea is having all these problems today, because, right, things have been just at a ceasefire in 1953. They just have stopped fighting, but there is no actual treaty for peace, and so that's why things are still at attention. Okay, all right. So the years from 1953 to 1955 is known as massive retaliation, because the United States is kind of like really upset and pissed off at this point, where they really want to help Eastern European countries to get rid of communism because Stalin has taken over. Okay, so I kind of went over this in class with the different Russian stacking dolls. Keep that in mind. The best way to understand the Cold War is just to break it off into different eras of the Soviet leaders. Okay, so if we talk about right after World War II, the leader at that time is going to be Stalin, and it's going to be for less than 10 years. Okay, so Stalin is going to be in charge of the Soviet Union throughout World War II, and after World War II, right? He believes in creating a buffer zone, which is what we call the Eastern Bloc in Eastern Europe. And so this is where after World War II, Stalin's going to be more oppressive, more repressive, because now it's not about getting people to work and fight for the war. Now it's just saying you need to serve the Soviet Union and build up its empire. Okay, so Stalin's going to be killing many people of his own country. Okay, and so you have just 12 million deaths in just the 7 years. In 7 years, right? And why is this significant as a number? It's because more than his great purges, more than the times where we had the Russian Civil War, right? This just in 7 years, you have the most deaths of their own citizens in the whole 1900s. And the main way of it is through gulags, which are the Soviet forced labor camps. And this is where you see them just working. And what are they working for? Is that Stalin is creating his 5-year plans, which is basically rapid overnight industrialization, trying to improve its industry because Stalin has noticed that it's very behind. It's not as strong and powerful as the United States, and they have been pretty much kind of a backwards country. And so a lot of construction is going to go on through these forced labor camps where they're suffering. Millions of people are dying. They're not being treated well, obviously, there. Okay. Also, I talked about in class the culture and art, propaganda, indoctrination. Everything is changed and is rewired because the Soviet Union is under secret police, right? It's under the KGB now, and Stalin wants complete control of everything that is glorifying to him, and this is where he kind of builds up, people to worship him instead of Orthodox Christianity. All right, moving on. Now we have these satellite states. Okay, so these satellite states are going to be can turn into communists. Okay, so you have Poland, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, East Germany, Romania, Bulgaria, Albania. And so the Soviet Union is going to start influencing them, dominating them, and establishing one-party rule. So that's really important. We talked about how in dictatorships, totalitarian states, it's one-party rule, meaning that there is no really free elections, and the Red Army, the Soviet Army, is going to be there to institute and control it. Right? They have no choice. Then we have one exception to this is going to be Tito in Yugoslavia. He's going to be the communist leader. The reason why the Soviet Union is not in control in Yugoslavia is because when Yugoslavia was trying to fight off the Nazis, he actually was able to lead the Slavs without the help of the Soviet Union. So then they are communist, except that they are not under control of the Soviet Union. Okay. Let's see. Anything else we need to go over? Okay, that's good for now. Okay, so now, Khrushchev. Khrushchev era comes after Stalin. Stalin is known for his harshness, right? He's known for his oppressive rule, iron fist. You oppose Stalin, you die, right? You have anything wrong that you have, any questions about the government, you go sent to Gulag. So a lot of reforms are going to come through Khrushchev because a lot of people begin to demand that reforms are needed because Stalin's a bully. Stalin has created this, reign of terror, essentially, right? Except it's, because he is the dictator. And so people are looking to have a reduction of the power of secret police, and also some of the gulags should be closed down as well. Okay, agriculturally, Russia's in a bad state, and so Khrushchev is coming in. Nikita Khrushchev is going to say, you know what, Stalin is very extreme, and so they're going to shift away from Stalin's old policies, and this is where de-Stalinization comes in. And so this is where Khrushchev is going to be sharing a secret speech, and he's going to be showing that Lenin once said how Stalin was not, the best fit for the Soviet Union, and how Stalin has done like all these oppressive things, and it's against what Lenin really wanted initially from before. So Khrushchev is kind of more open, more liberal compared to Stalin. Okay, so now we have two examples. We have Boris Pasternak and Alexander Solzhenitsyn, and this is where they are kind of intellectual writers, and they write different books, and they talk about how Stalin has kind of changed and warped what Lenin wanted initially for the Soviet Union, and also how in life in a gulag was terrible, and it talks about a character as a prisoner in a gulag. And so de-Stalinization has allowed a lot of these reforms come in where they have more liberty and freedom to voice and have these written works. Okay. Then we have Gosplan under the Khrushchev era, and this is going to be his decision to say, you know what, we're going to stop focusing on heavy industry, right? Going against Stalin's 5-year plans, changing that up instead of investing in our military, we're going to invest in consumer goods because people are demanding for a better, standard of living, and also going to invest into our agriculture. One thing to understand throughout the entire Soviet Union that it's always going to be centralized economic planning, also known as command economy. Okay, so having a command economy is saying that the central government is going to decide how everything is going to be decided in terms of how things are spent, how many jobs, how many things are bought and produced. Okay, so the reason why peaceful coexistence matters during the Cold War is because Nikita Khrushchev's desire to having better relationships with the West will allow him to then focus on improving the Soviet economy, the things that are happening internally. Also, eventually, Austria will gain its independence, and so the Soviet Union is going to allow Austria to no longer be under their control because they were in their control for the last 10 years after World War II. So in 1955, this is where Austria is now independent. And why is this important? It's because the Cold War tensions will kind of improve for a little bit, just for a little bit. Okay, so then we have Poland and Hungary. Have some uprisings. In Poland, you have some riots that happen. In Hungary, you have a lot of students, right, intellectuals, and some working class people in Budapest, and they're going to have demonstrations. They have a new kind of communist reformer. His name's Imre Nagy, and he is trying to introduce non-communist political parties. And from this, right, it became to an armed rebellion. Right, so anytime there's kind of uprising throughout the Soviet Union, they're going to come into the satellite states, roll in their tanks, and bring in the army and stop it. Okay, and that's really important to know, is because that's the way that kind of Khrushchev, Brezhnev, Stalin always saw the way to deal with any type of dissidents, any type of oppositions. You just bring in violence and you stop it. Where that was changed towards the end of the Cold War and the fall of the Soviet Union. Okay, so after the Hungarian invasion, most European countries were going to not try to be so violent in uprisings because they realize what kind of consequences are going to be. Okay, all right, let's fly through these events. Here you have Sputnik, which is the Soviet satellite sent into space, brought a lot of fear to Americans. The space race has begun. Then we get to land on the moon and all these back and forth. Right, we have to prove that we are technologically more superior to them. What else is happening? Okay, we have Sputnik. And then we have the U-2 incident. This is where a spy plane, the U.S. spy plane, is shot down. Tensions are now blowing up during Khrushchev era. I would say Cold War-wise, Khrushchev era is probably what a lot of questions are going to be about, and because a lot of major events are happening from this, and it just seems to be like so interesting in a sense where all these crazy tension events are happening. Okay, all right. So the U-2 spy plane is shot down. U.S. is kind of embarrassed. Soviet Union kind of caught them red-handed taking pictures of their country, of their military bases. Then the Berlin Wall. Okay, major event. Berlin Wall is constructed. We talked about the Berlin blockade. The Berlin Wall is the wall that is set up around West Berlin in order to keep East Germans going into West Berlin or East Berliners going to West Berlin. 2 million communist Germans, whether living in East Germany or East Berlin, they would go to West Berlin in 10 years, right? So 2 million people are leaving. That's a lot of people that are leaving. And why are they leaving? Because it's better to live in a capitalist democratic country, right? It just, your standard of living is better. You get paid for your job better, right? It's not, everything's just equal and dull and bland, okay? You don't have to struggle to live. So this is kind of a physical representation of a real barrier that is separating, right, the democratic from the communist sides. Okay, and then we have the Cuban Missile Crisis. This is what we call the 14 days where World War III almost broke out, and the reason why is because the United States had missiles in Turkey, right, nuclear missiles in Turkey. Then the Soviet Union got upset, and so they put nuclear missiles in Cuba. And so because of the proximity of Cuba to the United States, this has kind of caused the whole crisis. What's going to happen eventually? It just ends, right? JFK, Khrushchev, right? Khrushchev, because it looks like he kind of backed out, he looks weak. This is kind of bad on him. And so the Soviet Union will eventually remove its missiles from Cuba, right? And then we have a couple of other events just to throw out there. 1963, the Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. This is where the United States, Soviet Union, and Great Britain agreed to ban their testing of nuclear weapons in waters in the atmosphere. Okay, so this is helping Cold War tensions go down, right? So it's it's something where Cold War tensions are always fluctuating depending upon the event. Some of these are, crazy, is going to escalate, and some are just going to be cooling the tensions down. Okay, then we have the end where Khrushchev is eventually known to be not very good in his foreign policy because a lot of the cabinet, the Politburo of the Communist Party, realizes with the Berlin Wall, right, of losing all these, or like people flying or flooding to West Berlin, having to set up a Berlin Wall, and the Cuban Missile Crisis are examples of how he didn't kind of keep the empire together. Also, his complete spending of the space race and the arms race has made them really economically in a bad place. And also, a lot of his projects that he wanted to have as reforms would backfire too. Okay, so a lot of conservative Stalinist type of guys are going to come out and kind of like, make a shift back. So it's kind of a shifting of a pendulum back and forth on the political spectrum, even within a communist state. We all know that they are very left in a sense, but they're still, more conservatives within the state. All right.